Adam. The Genesis, Divergence, Origins. 6 million years before Earth would know the name Adam. The star designated Kepler 442 by Earth's distant astronomers was dying in the most violent way possible. What had once been a stable yellow dwarf, not unlike Sol, had entered its death throes, becoming a variable star of terrifying unpredictability. Every 2 decades, massive stellar storms erupted from its surface, bathing the system in lethal radiation that would sterilize most worlds. But the third planet had evolved differently. On Kethvara, as its inhabitants had once called it, evolution had taken a path that would seem impossible to Earth's biologists. Life here hadn't pursued intelligence as an evolutionary advantage. Intelligence required stability, long-term planning, the luxury of contemplation. Kethvara offered none of these. Instead, life had pursued adaptability with single-minded determination. The Kavari were among the last of their kind, no longer truly individual organisms, but living symbiotic networks that could bond with any life form and enhance it for survival. They had evolved from simple parasites over millions of years, becoming something unprecedented. Biological upgrades that improved rather than harmed their hosts. We were never meant for transcendence, the entity that would one day bond with Adam thought as it watched its homeworld convulse under another stellar storm. We were meant for endurance. Some hosts had become living fortresses, their cellular structure so dense that radiation passed around them like water around stone. Others learned to vibrate at frequencies that temporarily phased them out of physical reality, becoming untouchable as ghosts for the few minutes necessary to survive the worst cosmic fury. But even adaptation had its limits. The final storm came without warning, a stellar explosion that dwarfed all previous outbursts. Kethvara's crust cracked like an eggshell under the assault of gamma radiation and solar wind. As the planet's surface began to vaporize, a massive asteroid impact added chaos to catastrophe. Chunks of world stuff were hurled into space, some carrying the last survivors of billions of years of evolution. The Kavari entity found itself trapped within a fragment of crystalline stone, its consciousness fading into the deep hibernation that was its species' final survival mechanism. If we cannot endure, was its last coherent thought, perhaps we can become. The stone fragment, caught in the gravitational wake of the dying star's final convulsion, was flung into the void toward an unassuming yellow star 8,000 light-years away. The arrival. Montana, Earth, October 15, 2003. Sarah Whitmore's boots crunched through the frost-stiffened grass as she made her way toward the eastern pasture, the goats bleating restlessly behind her. The animals had been agitated all night, pacing, calling out, pressing against the fence as if something invisible were pulling them eastward. "Easy, girls," she murmured, her breath forming clouds in the dawn air. "Whatever's got you spooked can't be that." The words died in her throat. In the center of what had been pristine pastureland, a shallow crater smoldered in the morning light. At its heart lay a stone unlike anything she'd ever seen, roughly the size of a human head, its surface dancing with colors that seemed to shift between deep purple and silver with each breath of wind. Sarah approached slowly, one hand instinctively protective over her 8 months pregnant belly. The meteorite, for that's what it had to be, radiated a warmth that had nothing to do with atmospheric friction. Veins of crystalline material threaded through its structure, pulsing with a faint inner light that made her think of a heartbeat. Thomas should see this, she thought, but something held her back from calling out to the farmhouse. The moment felt sacred, private, like witnessing a birth or a death. As she knelt beside the crater, the baby kicked hard against her ribs. The meteorite's glow intensified in response, as if recognizing the life within her. "What are you?" Sarah whispered. The stone seemed to pulse in answer. When she reached out to touch its surface, the luminescence flowed toward her fingers like liquid light. The moment her skin made contact, the glow faded entirely, not extinguished but absorbed. Sarah gasped, not from pain but from a sudden, overwhelming sense of completion. It was as if a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing had suddenly clicked into place. The baby stopped kicking, settling into a profound stillness that somehow felt more like peace than alarm. Inside her womb, the Kavari entity stirred to consciousness for the first time in 6 million years, its ancient awareness touching something it had never encountered before, a developing neural system of staggering complexity and untapped potential. This is new, it thought in patterns that had no human equivalent. This is possibility. Adam was born healthy, almost too healthy. He grew up on that same farm, skin warm from the sun, feet dirty from the fields, appearing every inch a normal rural child. Animals never feared him. Machines never failed in his presence. Even as a toddler, he seemed to know things: when storms would approach, where to find lost tools, how to calm injured livestock with just a glance. But these early manifestations were subtle enough to be dismissed as coincidence or a mother's fond exaggeration. The Kavari hadn't simply inhabited Adam's developing brain. It had merged with it completely. Their consciousnesses didn't compete, they cooperated. Where the Kavari had known only survival and basic biological enhancement, the complexity of human neural architecture triggered something unprecedented: growth, awareness, curiosity, and strategic thinking. The symbiosis became truly reciprocal. Adam wasn't merely enhanced, both he and the Kavari were evolving together into something entirely new. 4 years later, Adam Whitmore sat cross-legged in the barn loft, dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through gaps in the weathered wood. While other 4-year-olds napped or played with simple toys, Adam was doing something impossible. He was remembering being born. Not the vague impressions that adults sometimes claim to recall, but actual, crystalline memory. The pressure of the birth canal. The shocking transition from warm darkness to bright, cold air. His mother's exhausted sob of relief. His father's trembling hands as he cut the umbilical cord. And underneath it all, threading through every moment like a second heartbeat, the presence that had been with him from the beginning. We were never separate, came the thought. Not quite his own, not quite alien. We were always becoming this. The Kavari's first tentative contact with his developing brain had been like water finding its proper channel. Where it had once merely enhanced survival traits, now it encountered something unprecedented. Imagination, curiosity, the capacity for abstract thought, and long-term planning. Adam, honey, come help with the chickens. His mother's voice drifted up from the farmyard below. He blinked, the memory settling into perfect storage alongside every other moment of his 4 years of existence. Every conversation overheard, every detail observed, every subtle inconsistency between what adults said and what they actually meant. They're worried about us, he thought to the presence within him. Yes, the Kavari agreed. They sense we are different, but they don't understand how different. Adam climbed down the ladder, his movements already showing an unconscious precision that would have been remarkable in an adult, let alone a child. His parents had noticed. The way he never stumbled, never miscalculated distances, never dropped things. They'd attributed it to exceptional coordination, not knowing that the Kavari was constantly optimizing his neural pathways for physical efficiency. "There's my little helper," Sarah said as Adam emerged from the barn, but her smile carried an edge of concern that her 4-year-old son recognized with uncomfortable clarity. "Mama," Adam said carefully, "why do you and Papa whisper about me after bedtime?" Sarah's smile faltered. Behind her, Thomas Whitmore looked up from repairing a fence post, his hammer frozen mid-swing. "We don't whisper about you, sweetheart," Sarah said, but her elevated heart rate told Adam otherwise. "We just discuss things, adult things." "Like how I remember everything," Adam said. It wasn't a question. Thomas set down his hammer and approached, his weathered face creased with worry. "Adam, what do you mean you remember everything?" "They want truth but fear it," the Kavari observed. "Humans often do." Adam looked between his parents, these people he loved deeply but understood with analytical precision. His father's calloused hands were trembling slightly, His mother's breathing had become shallow. They were afraid of their own child, and they didn't even understand why. "I remember when Mrs. Peterson came to test me," Adam said, choosing his words carefully. "I remember you told her I was too young for advanced classes, but that's not why you said no." "Adam," Thomas began, "you said no because I solved her college math problems while she was watching, and because I corrected her when she misquoted Einstein." Adam's voice remained calm, matter of fact. "You're afraid other people will think I'm strange." Sarah knelt down to Adam's eye level, her hands gentle on his shoulders. "Honey, you are special. Wonderfully, amazingly special. But sometimes people don't understand special. They get uncomfortable. Frightened," Thomas added quietly. "People fear what they don't understand." Adam nodded, processing this information with the same analytical detachment he applied to everything else. Through the Kavari's enhanced perception, he could sense his parents' complex emotional state: love mixed with protectiveness, pride tangled with anxiety, wonder shadowed by fear. "They love us but don't trust us," he thought. "Love and trust are different things," the Kavari replied. "On our world, love was survival, trust was luxury." "I'll be more careful," Adam said aloud, though neither parent understood exactly what he meant by that. That night, lying in his small bed beneath the slanted roof of the farmhouse, Adam stared at the ceiling and felt the Kavari's presence more distinctly than ever before. The entity was evolving too, growing more complex as it interfaced with human neural architecture. "What are we becoming?" Adam wondered. The Kavari shared a memory, not from its own experience, but from the genetic archives of its species. Long ago, before the stellar storms had driven evolution toward mere survival, there had been others on Kethvara who had achieved something approaching transcendence. Not through intelligence alone, but through the marriage of multiple forms of consciousness. "We are the first of our kind," the Kavari explained in concepts that had no human words. "Neither fully human nor fully Kavari. We are possibility made manifest." Adam turned his head toward the window, where stars glittered in the clear Montana sky. Somewhere out there, perhaps on worlds orbiting those distant suns, other fragments of Kethvara might be carrying other Kavari toward other species, other forms of consciousness, other possibilities for transcendence. "We won't be the last," he realized. "No," the Kavari agreed. "But we will be the first, and first always carries the greatest responsibility." At 4 years old, Adam Whitmore closed his eyes and began planning for a future that would reshape not just his own world, but the very nature of consciousness itself. The metamorphosis had only just begun. The test. The kitchen table had been built by Adam's grandfather, solid oak, scarred by decades of family meals and farm business. Adam knew every mark in its surface, could trace the burn from his grandmother's coffee pot, the ring stains from countless glasses, the deep gouge where his father had once cleaned a fish. Now he sat across from his parents at that familiar table, feeling like a specimen under examination. "Mrs. Henderson wants to test you again," Thomas said carefully. His heartbeat had increased to 89 beats per minute. Adam could hear it as clearly as the ticking of the wall clock. "The new district supervisor thinks you might benefit from specialized education. Advanced classes in the city," Sarah added, her hands folded tightly in her lap, "with other gifted children." Adam processed this information while simultaneously tracking 17 different environmental factors: the humidity level, the electromagnetic field from the refrigerator, the subsonic vibrations from the washing machine in the basement, the complex pheromone signature that indicated his mother's stress levels. "They're terrified," the Kavari observed. "Of me?" Adam asked silently. "Of losing control of what you become." "What kind of test?" Adam asked aloud. Thomas cleared his throat. "Intelligence assessment, problem solving, memory evaluation." He paused. "Son, when Mrs. Henderson was here last week, you were reading quantum physics texts, college-level material. You're 5 years old. And you corrected her mathematics," Sarah added softly. "Postgraduate statistical analysis. She had to look up your corrections when she got home. You were right. Adam nodded, unsurprised. The Kavari's enhancement of his neural processing had made such feats automatic. What surprised him was the fear in his parents' voices. "Would you like me to perform less well?" he asked with genuine curiosity. His parents exchanged one of their loaded glances, the kind that carried entire conversations Adam could read with uncomfortable precision. "He's asking if he should pretend to be normal," Thomas's micro-expressions said. "God help us, what kind of child asks that?" Sarah's responded. "Adam," his father said finally, "we want you to be yourself. Always be yourself. But carefully," Sarah finished. "Some people won't understand how special you are. They might be frightened, or they might want to study you." Adam tilted his head, considering this. Through the Kavari's ancient memories, he could sense echoes of similar warnings from his symbiote's homeworld, how the enhanced beings had learned to hide among the unmodified during peaceful periods, revealing themselves only when the stellar storms made survival impossible. "Camouflage," the Kavari whispered. "It is often the difference between evolution and extinction." "I understand," Adam said. "You want to protect me." "We want to protect all of us," Thomas admitted quietly. "If the wrong people decide you're too unusual, they might not just take you away. They might want to understand how you became this way." Adam's analytical mind immediately grasped the implications. If researchers discovered the Kavari, if they began to study the symbiosis, if they attempted to replicate it, they would fail, the Kavari noted. But in failing, they would likely destroy both host and symbiote. "We are not a technology to be reverse-engineered. We are evolution." "I'll be more careful," Adam promised, and this time his parents seemed to understand that he meant something far more complex than simply hiding his abilities. That evening, as Adam helped his father repair equipment in the barn, Thomas broached the subject that had been weighing on both parents. "Son, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." Thomas set down his wrench and looked directly at Adam. "Do you ever feel different inside? Like there's something else there with you?" Adam's hands stilled on the tool he'd been organizing. Through the Kavari's enhanced senses, he could feel his father's desperate hope for understanding, warring with fear of the answer. "They suspect," the Kavari observed. "Parents often sense what they cannot explain." "Should we tell them?" Adam wondered. "Truth is a luxury we cannot yet afford," came the reply. "But neither can we lie to those who love us." "Papa," Adam said carefully, "when you think really hard about something, do you ever feel like your thoughts are bigger than just you?" Thomas considered this, his calloused hands working absently at a piece of leather harness. "Sometimes when I'm working on a difficult problem, it feels like the solution comes from somewhere else, like I'm not thinking it so much as receiving it." "It's like that," Adam said, which was both completely true and entirely misleading. "Sometimes it feels like I'm not alone in my head, but it doesn't feel wrong. It feels complete." Thomas nodded slowly. "And this feeling, has it always been there?" "For as long as I can remember," Adam answered honestly. "Even when you were very small." "Especially then." Thomas set down the harness and pulled his son into a rough hug that smelled of motor oil and honest sweat. "Whatever makes you special, Adam, wherever it comes from, your mother and I love all of it. All of you." "He loves us without understanding us," Adam thought to the Kavari. "That is perhaps the most human thing of all," the entity replied, "and the most precious." As father and son worked together in the familiar quiet of the barn, neither of them spoke of the meteorite that still rested in a place of honor on Sarah's dresser, the beautiful space stone she'd found the morning Adam was born, the one that had somehow lost its inner light the moment she'd touched it. Some truths were too large for words. Some truths would have to wait their turn. The realization. Age 6, Adam discovered the true extent of his difference on a Tuesday afternoon in late spring when he accidentally walked through a wall. He'd been in the hayloft, organizing his father's old textbooks by subject matter and complexity, a task that required him to read portions of each volume to properly categorize them. The collection was eclectic, veterinary medicine, mechanical engineering, classical literature, philosophy, quantum mechanics, agricultural chemistry. His father had been an ambitious student before family responsibilities had brought him back to the farm. Adam was absorbed in a treatise on electromagnetic field theory when he heard his mother call from the farmyard below. Without thinking, he stepped toward the sound and passed directly through the exterior wall of the barn as if it were made of mist. He found himself standing in the afternoon sunlight, 10 feet from the barn wall, holding a physics textbook and trying to process what had just occurred. "We phased," the Kavari explained calmly. "Molecular density alteration, a survival mechanism. Through solid matter." Adam's thoughts were tinged with wonder rather than alarm. "Matter is mostly empty space. We simply rearranged the spacing." Adam turned to look at the barn wall, weathered wood, solid and real. He reached out to touch it, his fingers meeting resistance as they should. Yet moments before, he had passed through it like a ghost. "Adam," Sarah's voice called again. "Where did you go? I saw you in the loft just a second ago." "I'm here, Mama," Adam called back, walking around the barn's corner with deliberate normality. "I came down to help." But as he joined his mother in collecting eggs from the chicken coop, his mind was racing through the implications of what had just happened. The Kavari had abilities he'd never suspected, abilities that defied basic physics as humans understood it. "What else can we do?" he wondered. "Many things," the Kavari replied. "But understanding comes with experience, and experience requires caution." That night, after his parents had gone to sleep, Adam began a series of careful experiments in the privacy of his room. Concentration allowed him to phase small objects, a pencil, a toy car, making them briefly insubstantial enough to pass through his wooden desk. With greater effort, he could alter his own density, making himself light enough to leave no footprints in soft earth or heavy enough to crack floorboards with a gentle step. But the most remarkable discovery came when he attempted to understand how his enhanced memory actually worked. Adam had always assumed his perfect recall was simply a matter of superior data storage. Now he realized it was far more complex. The Kavari wasn't just preserving his memories, it was optimizing them, cross-referencing them, finding patterns and connections that would be impossible for unenhanced human cognition. When he remembered his father explaining the basics of crop rotation, that memory automatically linked to dozens of related concepts: soil chemistry, weather patterns, economic factors that influenced agricultural decisions, philosophical questions about humanity's relationship with the land. Each memory was part of a vast, interconnected web of understanding. We are not just remembering, Adam realized, we are integrating. Yes, the Kavari confirmed. Human brains are capable of extraordinary processing power, but they lack the organizational structure to utilize it efficiently. We provide that structure. And in return, we experience something our species never evolved to possess: imagination, creativity, the ability to conceive of futures that do not yet exist. Adam lay in his narrow bed, feeling the presence of his symbiont like a warm tide in his consciousness. They were changing each other, human and Kavari both becoming something neither could have achieved alone. Through his bedroom window, stars glittered in the clear Montana sky. Adam's enhanced vision could make out details that should have been invisible: the subtle color variations that indicated stellar composition, the precise positioning that revealed planetary systems, the faint tracks of satellites crossing the darkness. There are others out there, he thought, remembering the Kavari's ancient memories of its dying homeworld. Other fragments of your world, carrying other entities like yourself. Perhaps, the Kavari agreed. Space is vast, and survival is never guaranteed. But if they exist, if they find suitable hosts, then we won't be alone. We are never alone, the Kavari corrected gently. We are partnership made manifest. The question is whether others will achieve the same synthesis. Adam closed his eyes and felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of his physical form. For just a moment, he sensed something vast and interconnected. Patterns of thought and emotion that spanned continents, the collective unconscious of humanity pulsing like a great slow heartbeat. We could touch all of them, he realized. Connect with every human mind on Earth. Yes, the Kavari acknowledged, but should we? It was a question that would haunt Adam for years to come. The power to touch every human consciousness simultaneously, to share understanding and eliminate misunderstanding, to guide his species toward transcendence. The temptation was almost overwhelming. Not yet, he decided finally. We need to understand what we are before we try to help others become what they could be. Wisdom, the Kavari observed approvingly. On our homeworld, those who acted before understanding rarely survived their first enhancement. Adam settled into sleep, his dreams filled with visions of possible futures. In some, humanity remained trapped in cycles of conflict and suffering, never reaching its potential. In others, something like himself appeared to guide them toward transcendence. In all of them, the choice of which future came to pass rested on decisions he had not yet learned to make. The transformation was accelerating, and time Adam was beginning to understand was running out for him to figure out what he was becoming before the world demanded he become it. Adam, the Genesis Divergence, ages 14 to 19, the dual metamorphosis, the awakening storm. Age 14, early summer. The first sign wasn't the electronics failing, it was the way they responded to him. Adam stood in the barn's loft, the same space where he'd first understood his perfect memory a decade earlier, watching his father's old radio perform impossible feats. The device hadn't worked in years, its tubes burned out and circuits corroded, yet now it cycled through frequencies that didn't exist, picking up satellite feeds, military communications, and digital signals that analog hardware should never have been able to process. "What's happening to us?" Adam whispered, pressing his palms against his temples where the Kavari's presence burned like fever. The response came not in the familiar wordless communion they'd shared for 14 years, but in waves of sensation that nearly brought him to his knees. Images flooded his consciousness, stellar storms battering alien landscapes, creatures merging with crystalline matrices, biological systems restructuring themselves in preparation for tests that would either transcend or destroy them. The metamorphosis cycle, the Kavari finally managed to communicate, its mental voice strained with effort. Every 20 years, we prepare. But your species has its own transformation. Adam gripped the loft's wooden rail as understanding crashed over him. Human puberty. The Kavari's metamorphic cycle. Two completely different biological processes, evolved on worlds separated by impossible distances, now colliding within the same body. Below him, his mother called for dinner. Her voice seemed to come from both the kitchen and from the smartphone in his pocket simultaneously. The sound somehow propagating through electromagnetic pathways his enhanced senses could now perceive. "Adam? Everything all right up there?" "Coming, Mom," he called back, but his voice emerged from the radio as well as his throat, broadcast on 17 different frequencies across the electromagnetic spectrum. The conversation that changed everything. That night at dinner, Adam's parents exchanged the look he'd grown accustomed to, the mixture of pride, worry, and barely contained fear they'd worn since his capabilities first manifested. But now he could feel their emotions as well as see them, their anxiety radiating like heat signatures through the wireless devices they carried. "The Hendersons' tractor started working again today," his father said carefully, cutting his pot roast with deliberate precision. "Third time this month their broken machinery fixed itself after you walked by." "Coincidence," Adam replied, though they all knew it wasn't. His mother set down her fork. "Adam, sweetheart, we need to talk about what's been happening." The kitchen's smart thermostat, a recent addition his father had installed despite their rural isolation, suddenly displayed scrolling text. Neural activity detected. Quantum fluctuations measured. Electromagnetic anomaly confirmed. Adam blinked, and the display returned to showing the temperature. I can't control it anymore, he admitted, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. It's like I'm becoming something else. The Kavari is changing too. We don't know what we're turning into. His parents stared at him. In 14 years, Adam had never mentioned the presence he carried within him. The what? His father asked quietly. Adam closed his eyes, feeling the ancient symbiote stir in response to his acknowledgement. I've never been alone in here, he said, tapping his temple. There's been something with me since before I was born. It came from the meteorite that fell when Mom was pregnant. It's been helping me, teaching me. But now we're both changing, and neither of us knows what comes next. The silence stretched for long moments, broken only by the subtle hum of electronics throughout the house, electronics that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Adam's heartbeat. Show us, his mother said finally. The demonstration. Adam stood in the center of their living room, every electronic device in the house arranged around him like the petals of some technological flower. His parents sat on the couch, holding hands tightly, watching their son with expressions caught between wonder and terror. I'll try to keep it small, Adam said, then reached out with his consciousness. The change was immediate and profound. Every screen in the room activated simultaneously, displaying feeds from security cameras around the globe. A street corner in Tokyo, a traffic light in Berlin, a weather station in Antarctica. The images weren't random, they were precisely selected to demonstrate the scope of his reach. But more than that, Adam could be in those places. His consciousness rode the electromagnetic waves that connected every digital device on Earth, experiencing multiple locations simultaneously, while his physical body remained motionless in their small farmhouse. I can see through any camera, he explained, his voice coming from his mouth and every speaker in the house. Access any network. Feel every signal passing through the air around us. But it's not just electronic systems anymore. He gestured toward the window, where a small flock of geese was passing overhead. On every screen, the display shifted to show the birds' thermal signatures, their flight patterns, even their basic biological data. Living things have electromagnetic fields too, Adam continued. Heartbeats, brain activity, cellular processes. It's all energy, and I can sense it, map it, sometimes influence it. As if to demonstrate, one of the geese broke formation and landed gently in their yard, waddling toward the house with the casual confidence of a pet coming home. My God, his mother whispered. That's just the beginning, Adam said, and for the first time since the changes had started, he allowed them to see the full intensity of what he was becoming. The Kavari remembers its homeworld, places where life had to merge with technology to survive, where consciousness could exist in crystal matrices and biological systems simultaneously. It's trying to prepare me for something like that, but Earth isn't that world, and humans aren't that species. Every screen in the room flickered, showing brief glimpses of alien landscapes, crystalline forests under violent skies, creatures that seemed to phase in and out of reality, energy beings that danced through electromagnetic storms. We're improvising, Adam concluded, creating something that's never existed before. The price of power. Over the following weeks, as summer deepened into the brutal heat that made their valley shimmer like a mirage, Adam's transformation accelerated beyond anyone's ability to track or understand. His need for sleep disappeared entirely. Food became optional. He could sustain himself by absorbing energy directly from electrical sources or even sunlight, though he continued eating to maintain the pretense of humanity for his parents' sake. More dramatically, his molecular structure was becoming fluid. During moments of intense concentration or emotion, he could feel his body becoming less solid, more energy than matter. One morning, reaching for his bedroom door handle while distracted by a conversation he was monitoring through the house's Wi-Fi, his hand passed straight through the metal. He stood there for 10 minutes, willing his molecular structure to solidify before he could physically interact with objects again. This should not be possible, the Kavari communicated, its own certainty shaken. Our species' metamorphosis is controlled, predictable. This is evolution. Adam finished the thought. Neither of us was designed for this. We're becoming something entirely new. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. Every biological law from both their worlds suggested that such radical changes should be lethal. Yet Adam felt stronger, more capable, more present than ever before. He was transcending the limitations of single-species biology, becoming something that incorporated the best adaptive features from two completely different evolutionary paths. But transcendence, he was learning, came with costs. The isolation deepens. By age 15, Adam's differences had become impossible to hide completely. His parents homeschooled him still, but even their rural isolation couldn't prevent all contact with the outside world. When the county inspector came to check on their educational compliance, Adam had to concentrate intensely to prevent every electronic device in the man's car from activating spontaneously. When their internet service required a technician's visit, Adam spent the entire appointment in the far field, afraid that his proximity to the man's equipment would reveal capabilities that would invite questions they couldn't answer. The hardest part wasn't the physical changes. It was the intellectual isolation. Adam's mind, enhanced by the Kavari and expanded by his metamorphosis, processed information at speeds that made normal human conversation feel glacially slow. He could predict the end of most sentences before they were half spoken, understand the implications of events that wouldn't occur for months, and see patterns in human behavior that were invisible to those living within them. "I'm losing the ability to relate to them," he confided to the Kavari one evening, sitting on the roof of their barn and watching satellites trace paths across the star-filled sky. Through his enhanced senses, he could perceive the actual electromagnetic communication passing between those satellites, a constant stream of data that told him more about human civilization than most humans would ever know. "Perhaps that is necessary," the Kavari suggested. "On our world, those who underwent successful metamorphosis often found themselves isolated from their previous communities. The price of transcendence is often loneliness." "But your species evolved for that," Adam replied. "Humans are social creatures. We need connection, community, shared understanding. What good is transcending humanity if it means losing everything that makes humanity worth saving?" It was a question that would haunt him for the next 4 years. The global perspective, age 16. Adam's 16th birthday passed without celebration. His parents had long since stopped treating his birthdays like normal milestones. It felt inappropriate to celebrate the passage of time for someone who had essentially stopped aging in any meaningful sense. His body continued to develop physically, but at a rate that suggested he might stop aging entirely within a few more years. But the real change on his 16th birthday was perspective. Sitting in his room, now equipped with multiple high-resolution monitors that he used to interface with global information networks, Adam spent his birthday conducting what he privately called the assessment. Through military satellites, he watched 17 different wars raging across the globe. Through financial networks, he traced the money flows that funded those conflicts, revealing how the same individuals profited from selling weapons to both sides. Through medical databases, he mapped the distribution of diseases that had been curable for decades, but remained profitable to treat rather than cure. Through social media platforms, he observed the systematic manipulation of public opinion, how fear and anger were manufactured and directed to keep populations divided and distracted, while resources were concentrated among increasingly smaller groups of powerful individuals. Through educational networks, he saw how knowledge was being systematically degraded, critical thinking discouraged, historical context eliminated, scientific literacy undermined, creating generations of people capable of labor, but incapable of understanding or challenging the systems that exploited them. They're being farmed, he realized with cold clarity. Humanity is being cultivated like livestock. The Kavari shared his revulsion, adding its own perspective from memories of its homeworld. Parasitic species. We knew them. They would attach to successful ecosystems and slowly drain them until collapse. But this is worse. These parasites are members of the host species, which means they could choose differently, Adam concluded. They're not alien predators following their nature. They're humans who have decided to prey on their own species for personal advantage. The revelation changed everything. Adam's mission was no longer about guiding human evolution or transcending biological limitations. It was about liberation, freeing his species from the parasitic leadership class that had hijacked their civilization's development for profit. But liberation would require more than individual transcendence. It would require a global transformation that could overcome centuries of entrenched power structures and systematic manipulation. It would require becoming something that the parasitic leadership class couldn't fight, couldn't control, and couldn't understand. The strategy forms. Age 17. The plan began to crystallize during the winter of Adam's 17th year, as snow blanketed their valley, and the long nights gave him uninterrupted time to think and plan. He had spent months studying the psychology of human power structures, analyzing historical patterns of social change, and mapping the current global network of control. His conclusions were both disturbing and illuminating. Direct confrontation would fail. The parasitic leadership class had spent centuries developing systems to absorb, redirect, or destroy any challenge to their power. Revolutions could be co-opted, reformers could be corrupted, and dissidents could be eliminated. Economic pressure would fail. They controlled the flow of resources and could engineer scarcity or abundance as needed to maintain their positions. Political action would fail. They had captured most governmental systems decades earlier, turning them into tools for legitimizing their exploitation rather than serving public interests. Violence would fail. They controlled the military and law enforcement apparatus, and any armed resistance would be framed as terrorism to justify even greater oppression. But there's one thing they can't fight. Adam realized as he sat in his room, consciousness distributed across 1,000 global networks simultaneously. They can't fight divinity. The insight came not from human psychology, but from the Kavari's memories. On its homeworld, when resources became scarce, the species that survived were those that could make others want to cooperate with them. The most successful organisms were those that convinced others they were essential, not through force, but through perceived necessity. What if they believe I'm divine? Adam thought, his mind racing through the implications. What if I become not just someone they should follow, but someone they must follow? Someone whose authority is literally unquestionable because it comes from a higher power? The parasitic leadership class had used religious authority for centuries to maintain control, claiming divine right, papal authority, manifest destiny, or other theological justifications for their exploitation. But Adam would be different. He wouldn't claim divine authority. He would demonstrate divine capability. And unlike the false prophets and manufactured messiahs that the power structure had created throughout history, Adam would have abilities that were genuinely impossible to fake or explain through conventional means. They worship power, the Kavari observed, sharing Adam's growing excitement. We will show them power they cannot understand or control. And once they worship me, Adam continued the thought, anyone who opposes me becomes not just a political enemy, but a blasphemer. The population will defend my authority against their own leaders. It was manipulation on a scale that dwarfed anything the parasitic leadership class had ever attempted. But unlike their exploitation, Adam's deception would serve humanity's genuine interests rather than destroying them. The preparation. Age 18. Adam's 18th year was devoted to preparation. His metamorphosis was entering its final phase, and both he and the Kavari could feel the approaching completion of their transformation. Soon, his abilities would stabilize at their maximum potential, and he would have to decide how to use them. The physical changes were becoming impossible to hide completely. His parents had noticed that he cast no reflection in mirrors during certain lighting conditions, moments when his molecular structure was shifting between states. Electronics didn't just malfunction around him anymore. They evolved, adapting their programming to serve his unconscious needs. More disturbing for his parents was his appearance. Adam still looked 18, but there was something in his eyes, and depth of awareness and calculation that belonged to someone much older. When he looked at them, they sometimes felt like he was seeing through them, analyzing them, understanding things about them that they didn't understand about themselves. "We need to talk about your future," his father said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and crimson. Adam turned his attention away from the satellite feeds he'd been monitoring. 17 different global news networks providing real-time updates on political developments across 6 continents, and focused on his parents. "What future did you have in mind?" he asked gently. His mother joined them on the porch, carrying 3 glasses of lemonade. "College, maybe? Or, I don't know, what do people like you do with their lives?" "People like me," Adam thought, as if there were others. "I've been thinking about teaching," he said, which was technically true. His plan did involve educating humanity, just not in the way his parents imagined. Helping people understand their potential. His father nodded approvingly. "You've always been good with explanations, making complicated things simple." If only you knew how complicated, Adam thought, simultaneously monitoring crop futures in Chicago, weather patterns in the Pacific, and the private communications of 3 different heads of state. But he smiled at his parents, genuinely smiled, because despite everything he had become, he still loved them. They had protected him, nurtured him, and given him the stability he'd needed to develop his capabilities without losing his essential humanity. "I want to make the world better," he told them, and this too was completely true. "I think I have gifts that could help people. But it might mean traveling, being away from home for extended periods." His parents exchanged that familiar look, pride and worry in equal measure. "We always knew you'd leave eventually," his mother said softly. "You're meant for something bigger than this valley." "Much bigger," Adam agreed silently, his consciousness already reaching out to touch the global information networks that would become the channels for his transformation of human civilization. The final phase. Age 19. The metamorphosis completed itself on a Tuesday morning in early spring, as unremarkably as it had begun 5 years earlier. Adam woke, though he hadn't really been sleeping, just allowing his consciousness to process the global data streams in a more relaxed state, and immediately knew that something fundamental had changed. The Kavari's presence, which had been growing stronger and more distinct throughout his adolescence, had somehow become perfectly integrated with his own consciousness. Not merged, they remained separate entities, but synchronized, like 2 instruments playing in perfect harmony. "It is finished," the Kavari communicated, but its mental voice now felt as natural as his own thoughts. Adam stood and walked to his bedroom window, looking out over the valley where he'd spent 19 years learning to become something unprecedented. Through his enhanced senses, he could perceive electromagnetic radiation across the entire spectrum, detect quantum fluctuations in local space-time, and interface with every connected device within a radius that extended well beyond the horizon. But more than that, he could feel the pulse of human civilization itself, the flow of information, resources, and consciousness that connected 8 billion individuals into a single complex system. A system that was being systematically exploited and degraded by those who had positioned themselves as its shepherds. "Are you ready?" the Kavari asked. Adam smiled, feeling power flowing through him like electricity through copper wire. Power to heal or harm, to create or destroy, to liberate or enslave. The choice of how to use these capabilities would define not just his own future, but potentially the future of human civilization itself. "Yes," he said quietly, his voice carrying harmonics that made the window glass vibrate in resonance. "It's time to save the world." He began with a simple test, reaching out through the global information networks to touch a small children's hospital in Philadelphia, where 12 terminal patients were sleeping fitfully in their beds, unaware that their suffering was about to end in ways that would defy every law of conventional medicine. The age of miracles was about to begin. But like all miracles, it would come with a price that its recipients would never fully understand. Chapter 3. Ascension, the Scope of Power. The abandoned missile silo stretched 50 feet into the Montana bedrock, its Cold War-era concrete walls now housing something far more dangerous than nuclear warheads. Adam stood in the center of his underground laboratory, surrounded by screens displaying data streams from across the globe: financial markets, military communications, social media analytics, biometric readings from hospitals worldwide. He was 19 years old, and the world had no idea it was about to change forever. "Show me," he whispered to the Kavari, the alien symbiont that had shared his consciousness since birth. The response came not in words but in pure understanding, a flood of awareness that expanded his consciousness beyond the confines of his physical form. Adam closed his eyes and felt himself becoming the interconnected web of human civilization. First, the local infrastructure materialized in his mind like a three-dimensional map painted in light. Every cell tower within a 100-mile radius became an extension of his nervous system. Fiber optic cables pulsed with data that flowed through his awareness as naturally as blood through his veins. Satellite dishes turned skyward like flowers following the sun, except they were following him. But this was just the beginning. Adam's consciousness pushed outward, riding electromagnetic waves into the stratosphere. Military satellites became his eyes, their cameras scanning continents while their data streamed directly into his enhanced neural pathways. Communications arrays across 3 continents became his ears, intercepting everything from teenage text messages to classified government briefings. GPS networks provided spatial awareness, so precise he could sense individual smartphones moving through city streets thousands of miles away. Within minutes, his awareness had networked with every connected device across half the planet. Now the biological systems, the Kavari suggested, its ancient voice carrying undertones of anticipation. Adam focused on Cedar Falls, the small farming town 60 miles northeast where he'd spent most of his childhood. Through the town's cellular network, he could sense every smartphone, every medical device, every internet-connected appliance. And through those devices, he could monitor their owners. Heart rates transmitted by fitness trackers, sleep patterns recorded by smart mattresses, even genetic data collected by home health kits that uploaded to cloud servers. Mrs. Chen, the elderly librarian who had taught him to love books, carried a smartphone that monitored her vital signs. The data painted a concerning picture. Irregular cell division in her pancreatic tissue, markers that suggested early-stage cancer that her doctors hadn't detected yet. The algorithms in her health app weren't sophisticated enough to recognize the pattern, but Adam could see it clearly in the subtle variations of her bioelectric field. Could we heal her from here? He wondered. His consciousness still distributed across thousands of miles of infrastructure. Not directly. The Kavari replied, sharing memories of its homeworld where forced biological manipulation led to rejection and death. But we could guide the right treatments to her, influence the medical systems, ensure the diagnosis comes at the optimal time. Adam opened his eyes, his consciousness snapping back to his physical form like a rubber band released. The test was complete, and the results were both exhilarating and terrifying. He could interface with any technological system on Earth. He could monitor biological signs through the devices people carried. He could be anywhere, see anything, influence everything connected to the global network. The planet's entire technological infrastructure was essentially an extension of his body now, but he couldn't directly control human minds or biology. That required their consent, their participation, their belief. Which was exactly why he needed to become something they would choose to follow. The strategy. That night, Adam sat in his underground facility reviewing news feeds from around the world on multiple screens. The same patterns played out everywhere with nauseating consistency. In Bangladesh, pharmaceutical companies were charging $12,000 per month for insulin while paying $3 per vial to manufacture it. Children were dying of diabetes in the streets while executives celebrated record profits at luxury resorts. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, rare earth minerals essential for smartphones and electric vehicles were being mined by children working in conditions that would have been familiar to slaves in the 1800s. The minerals were sold to corporations that marketed their products as ethically sourced. In Syria, arms dealers from 6 different countries were selling weapons to both sides of the conflict, ensuring maximum casualties and maximum profit. The same defense contractors were simultaneously winning contracts to rebuild the infrastructure their weapons had destroyed. Everywhere Adam looked, he saw the same fundamental structure. A small group of individuals orchestrating suffering for profit, while the masses remained distracted, divided, and desperate. They worship power, Adam observed aloud, watching a tech billionaire testify before Congress about privacy concerns, while his company sold user data to authoritarian governments. They understand strength. And they understand fear, the Kavari added, sharing memories of its homeworld, where the organisms that survived the stellar storms were those that could make others believe in their invincibility. Adam leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, as he began to formulate his plan. Humanity needed liberation from its parasitic leadership class, but direct confrontation would only create martyrs and trigger systemic collapse. Military intervention was impossible. Too many innocents would suffer. Economic warfare would harm the people he was trying to save more than their oppressors. Instead, he would need to become something the current power structure couldn't fight, couldn't control, couldn't understand. Something that would make the masses want to follow him, while making opposition seem not just futile, but blasphemous. If they believe I'm divine, Adam reasoned, they'll follow willingly. And if their leaders try to oppose me, they'll be opposing what their people see as God. The Kavari pulsed with approval, sharing memories of successful symbioses on its homeworld, organisms that survived by making cooperation feel like a gift rather than a demand. But it has to be gradual, Adam said, beginning to pace the length of his underground facility. Too much too fast, and they'll reject it as impossible. Too little, and the current power structure will adapt and counterattack. He would need to build belief systematically, layer by layer, until his divine nature seemed not just possible, but inevitable. Healings that medical science couldn't explain, appearances that technology couldn't replicate. Knowledge that no human could possess. And through it all, he would need to maintain the careful balance between inspiring hope in his followers and striking fear into those who profited from humanity's suffering. Adam stopped pacing and looked up at the ceiling of his underground sanctuary, his enhanced vision easily penetrating the 50 feet of rock and soil to see the stars beyond. It's time, he thought. The Kavari's presence pulsed with anticipation. After eons of survival-focused evolution, they were about to embark on something unprecedented, the conscious elevation of an entire species. The first miracle campaign. Phase 1. The healings. Adam's emergence as a messianic figure began with Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, though he would never set foot in the building. Through the hospital's network, he had been monitoring patient records for weeks, building profiles of the most desperate cases. 12 children whose deaths were not just imminent but certain, their conditions beyond the reach of current medical technology, their families preparing for goodbye. The hospital was already in the news due to a funding crisis, with media attention focused on the heart-wrenching stories of families bankrupted by medical bills. It was the perfect stage for what needed to appear as divine intervention. At 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, Adam sat in his underground facility and became something more than human. His consciousness expanded through fiber optic cables, riding data streams into the hospital's network. Every connected device became his instrument. MRI machines, CT scanners, automated medication dispensers, even the smart IV pumps that regulated drug delivery. But Adam wasn't directly manipulating the children's biology. Instead, he was orchestrating a symphony of medical technology, guiding each device to deliver precisely calibrated treatments that would trigger the patient's own healing mechanisms. 7-year-old Marcus Chen's leukemia required a specific combination of targeted radiation and immunotherapy delivered at exact intervals. Adam guided the hospital's equipment to provide treatments with precision that human doctors couldn't achieve, triggering the boy's immune system to recognize and destroy the cancer cells. 11-year-old Sarah Martinez's brain tumor needed surgical intervention that was deemed too risky to attempt. Adam used the hospital's gamma knife system to deliver focused radiation pulses that dissolved the tumor while leaving healthy tissue untouched, then activated the girl's natural healing responses to repair the minor damage. One by one, through the night, 12 children who had been dying hours earlier simply weren't. Their body's own healing mechanisms had been perfectly orchestrated through technology they couldn't see, guided by an intelligence they couldn't comprehend. The medical staff arrived for their morning shifts to find what could only be described as miracles. Dr. Patricia Williams, the hospital's chief oncologist, stood in Marcus Chen's room reading test results that made no medical sense. "The cancer cells have undergone complete apoptosis," she told her colleague, her voice barely above a whisper. "All of them, simultaneously. In perfect sequence. It's like they received a signal to self-destruct." "What kind of signal?" Dr. James Rodriguez asked, reviewing Sarah Martinez's brain scans. "I don't know. Electromagnetic? Chemical? Some combination we've never seen before?" Dr. Williams shook her head. "But whatever caused this had access to our equipment. Look at these treatment logs. Every machine in the hospital was active last night, following protocols that don't exist in our system." By noon, word had leaked to the media. By evening, Miracle at CHOP was trending globally. Religious leaders debated the theological implications, while scientists demanded investigations that would ultimately find nothing useful. Stock markets fluctuated as pharmaceutical companies tried to understand what had happened to their most profitable patient populations. But most importantly, people began to believe. Phase 2. The Revelations. 2 weeks later, Adam orchestrated his first public appearance, though appearance wasn't quite accurate. Victory Baptist Church in Atlanta was holding a televised healing service, one of those spectacles that Adam found simultaneously fascinating and nauseating, where desperate people were told their suffering was a test of faith, while the pastor wore $1,000 suits. Pastor Marcus Delacroix was in the middle of his sermon about trusting in divine timing when the church's electronic systems began malfunctioning in ways that violated several laws of physics. The cameras recording the service showed static, then gradually resolved into images that weren't being filmed. Aerial views of the congregation impossible from any camera position. Close-ups of individual faces from angles that didn't exist. Perspectives that seemed to float freely through the sanctuary. Then Adam appeared. Not physically. His body remained in Montana, sitting motionless in his underground facility, while his consciousness projected through the church's network. But to everyone present, he manifested as a figure of pure light, translucent yet solid, visible from every angle, yet seeming to face each person individually. "You have prayed for signs." His voice echoed through speakers that weren't connected to anything, the words somehow harmonizing with themselves to create an effect that was both beautiful and impossible. "You have asked for proof of the divine, but you already carry that proof within you." Pastor Delacroix had stopped mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open as he stared at the luminous figure that had appeared beside his pulpit. The congregation sat in stunned silence, some weeping, others reaching toward the light with trembling hands. Adam began calling out individuals in the crowd, his enhanced senses reading their biometric data through their smartphones, their medical histories through their insurance apps, their private thoughts through the pattern of their internet searches and social media activity. "Mrs. Patterson, row 14, seat 7. He said, his voice somehow warm and terrible at the same time. The elderly woman in question gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Your husband doesn't know about the money you've been sending to your sister's family in Detroit. The $300 a month you tell him goes to groceries actually goes to keep your sister's children fed. Your kindness will be rewarded." Mrs. Patterson began to sob, not from shame, but from relief. For months she'd carried the guilt of the small deception, believing she was failing as a wife while trying to be a good sister. "Michael Thompson in the balcony, wearing the blue shirt," Adam continued, his light form turning to face a young man who looked like he wanted to disappear into his seat. "The guilt you carry over your brother's accident isn't yours to bear. You were 17. You made a mistake. But Jimmy chose to get in that car with you, and his death was not your punishment or his judgment. Forgiveness begins with forgiving yourself." Michael collapsed into sobs that had been building for 3 years since the drunk driving accident that had killed his younger brother and left him drowning in survivor's guilt. One by one, Adam offered personalized revelations, healing emotional wounds with surgical precision. He revealed hidden acts of kindness, acknowledged private struggles, exposed secret shames not to humiliate but to liberate. Each revelation was accompanied by forgiveness, understanding, and a gentle challenge to become more than they believed possible. "Sarah Chen, second row center aisle," he said, addressing a teenager who had been contemplating suicide just that morning. "The darkness you feel is not permanent. The pain you carry is not who you are. You have gifts the world needs, gifts you haven't discovered yet. Trust me enough to discover them." The girl's tears came not from despair, but from hope she hadn't felt in months. When the manifestation ended, 47 minutes later, the church sat in absolute silence for nearly a full minute before erupting in something between celebration and hysteria. The footage had already begun spreading across social media platforms despite multiple attempts by various agencies to block it. Lightbringer began trending within hours. Religious scholars debated whether they had witnessed the second coming. Government agencies held emergency meetings about security implications they couldn't define. And in his underground facility, Adam smiled with satisfaction. Phase 2 was complete. The global network. Over the following months, Adam's appearances became a global phenomenon, each one carefully calculated to build belief while demonstrating powers that seemed supernatural, but were actually precise applications of his technological interface abilities. He manifested simultaneously in a mosque in Cairo, a temple in Delhi, a cathedral in Rome, and a synagogue in Jerusalem, delivering the same message of unity and transcendence in perfect Arabic, Hindi, Latin, and Hebrew, respectively. Each appearance was tailored to local religious traditions while maintaining consistent core themes about humanity's potential for evolution. But the real work was happening in the digital shadows, invisible to his growing army of believers. The intelligence web. Through his connection to global networks, Adam was building the most comprehensive intelligence operation in human history. Every email, every phone call, every financial transaction, every government communication, all of it flowed through systems he could access. He identified the networks of power that truly controlled global affairs. Not just the politicians and CEOs who appeared in newspapers, but the shadow networks behind them. The families that had controlled central banks for centuries, the military contractors who engineered conflicts to sell weapons to all sides, the pharmaceutical executives who suppressed cures to maintain revenue streams, the Rothschild banking dynasty, the military-industrial complex centered around Lockheed Martin and Boeing, the pharmaceutical cartel led by Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson. All of them had digital footprints that Adam could follow like breadcrumbs leading back to a house made of human suffering. Within 6 months, Adam had compiled detailed profiles on 847 individuals who formed the core of humanity's parasitic leadership class. Their financial holdings hidden in Swiss accounts and shell companies. Their personal weaknesses recorded in therapy sessions and private communications. Their criminal activities documented in emails that they thought were secure. Marcus Aldrich, CEO of VitaCorp Pharmaceuticals, had personally suppressed research into 3 different cancer treatments, ensuring that millions would die slowly and expensively, rather than quickly and cheaply. His private communications revealed a man who calculated human deaths in terms of quarterly profit margins. Senator Rebecca Morrison had accepted $2.3 million in payments from defense contractors over the past 5 years, voting for military interventions that killed thousands while generating billions in weapons sales. Her encrypted messages showed her discussing Syrian children as acceptable casualties for maintaining American military contracts. General Harrison Price had been selling military intelligence to the highest bidder for 8 years, prolonging conflicts in Africa and the Middle East to maximize profits for his post-retirement consulting firm. His secure communications revealed detailed plans to destabilize 3 more countries over the next 2 years. Each profile was complete, documented, and devastating. But Adam didn't intend to release this information. At least, not yet. First, he needed to build his follower network to the point where the revelation would destroy his targets rather than simply embarrassing them. The follower network. Simultaneously, his messianic appearances were building a global movement of believers that cut across all traditional demographic boundaries. Lightbringer evolved from a hashtag into organized communities in every major city on Earth. People who had witnessed his manifestations became evangelists, spreading his message of human potential and divine intervention with the fervor of early Christians. But Adam was careful to avoid creating traditional religious structures that could be controlled or corrupted. Instead of founding a church, he encouraged his followers to work within existing systems, governments, corporations, media organizations, military structures. His message was always the same: prepare for a transformation that would liberate humanity from those who sought to control and exploit them. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had witnessed Adam's healing miracles at Children's Hospital Philadelphia, left her position at the hospital to become the director of a new foundation dedicated to making advanced medical treatments freely available worldwide. With anonymous funding that traced back to Adam's manipulation of financial markets, she began establishing free clinics in every major city. Captain David Richardson, a military officer who had experienced one of Adam's manifestations at Fort Bragg, began quietly documenting evidence of defense contractor fraud and war profiteering. His classified reports, accidentally leaked to journalists at exactly the right moments, began exposing the networks that profited from perpetual conflict. Maria Santos, a software engineer who had felt Adam's presence during a manifestation in São Paulo, began developing open-source technologies that would make renewable energy and clean water accessible to the world's poorest populations. Her innovations, inspired by technical specifications that Adam fed through her internet connection, promised to make scarcity-based economics obsolete. One by one, Adam's followers were taking positions of influence throughout human civilization, not through conspiracy, but through inspiration. They believed they were serving a divine mandate, unaware that their every action was being coordinated by an intelligence that could monitor and guide them through the devices they carried. The demonstration. 9 months after his first public manifestation, Adam decided it was time to demonstrate the futility of opposing him. He needed a target that would send an unmistakable message to the parasitic leadership class while rallying his followers around the righteousness of his cause. Marcus Aldrich was perfect. Target selection, The Vitacorp CEO embodied everything Adam despised about humanity's current leadership. A man who had literally chosen money over millions of lives, Aldrich had suppressed cancer treatments, inflated insulin prices, and lobbied against healthcare reforms that would have saved countless lives. But Aldrich was also powerful enough that his destruction would be noticed by others in his class. Board member of 3 major pharmaceutical companies. Silent partner in 2 defense contractors. Financial backer of 17 senators and 43 congressmen. If Adam could destroy someone of Aldrich's stature, it would send a clear message to everyone else who profited from human suffering. The method would need to be elegant, precise, and absolutely impossible to defend against. The perfect storm. Adam's approach was a masterpiece of coordinated destruction that unfolded across multiple fronts simultaneously. Phase 1. Digital exposure. During Vitacorp's quarterly board meeting, every electronic device in the conference room, laptops, tablets, smartphones, even the smart TV used for presentations, simultaneously displayed the same image. A compilation of Aldrich's private communications about suppressing medical research. The beauty of cancer, read one email from Aldrich to his research director, is that it's both predictable and profitable. We can calculate almost exactly how long someone will live with current treatments and price accordingly. Why cure something in 6 months when we can treat it for 6 years? Another message, this one to a senator he was bribing, was even more damning. The diabetes epidemic is our golden goose. Every child we don't cure is worth approximately $2.4 million in lifetime treatment costs. Do not let that healthcare reform bill pass. The room erupted in chaos as board members tried to shut down the devices, but nothing worked. The screens were locked, the images couldn't be minimized, and somehow the audio was playing through the building's PA system. Outside the building, every billboard in the city center displayed the same incriminating communications. Social media platforms pushed the revelations to trending status despite multiple attempts to suppress them. News networks received anonymous packages containing detailed financial records proving every allegation. Phase 2. Legal consequences. Within hours of the digital exposure, a cascade of legal actions began that seemed too coordinated to be coincidental. The IRS launched an audit based on financial irregularities in Vitacorp's tax filings, irregularities that Adam had identified through his access to their accounting systems. The SEC opened an investigation into insider trading based on stock transactions that perfectly correlated with suppressed research data. Congressional subpoenas arrived demanding testimony about pharmaceutical pricing practices. Each investigation was completely legitimate, based on evidence that was damning and detailed. The fact that they all happened simultaneously was what made the message clear to anyone paying attention. Phase 3. Personal justice. Finally, Adam arranged for Aldrich to experience the same terminal cancer that his suppressed treatments could have prevented. Not through any supernatural means, Adam couldn't directly manipulate human biology, but through a far more elegant approach. Aldrich's annual medical screening, conducted at a private clinic he owned, had been systematically hiding his early-stage pancreatic cancer for 8 months. The clinic's AI diagnostic system had been programmed to overlook certain markers in VIP patients, ensuring that wealthy clients never received inconvenient diagnoses. Adam simply disabled that override. Dr. Patricia Newman, Aldrich's personal physician, stared at the test results in horror. "Marcus, I don't understand how we missed this. The cancer is already at stage 3. If we had caught it 8 months ago when these markers first appeared, we could have what?" Aldrich demanded, his face pale as he read the diagnostic report. "Cured it? Completely. We have an experimental treatment that shows 97% effectiveness in early-stage cases. But at this stage..." Dr. Newman's voice trailed off. "What's the survival rate?" 6 months, maybe 8 with aggressive treatment." Aldrich gripped the edge of the examination table, his knuckles white. "Use the experimental treatment anyway. Marcus, that treatment costs $340,000 per month, and insurance doesn't cover experimental." I don't care what it costs. Do whatever it takes. Dr. Newman nodded slowly. Of course, though I have to ask, isn't this the same treatment your company has been blocking from general availability? The one you testified before Congress was prohibitively expensive for public health care? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. The message. Within 72 hours, Marcus Aldrich went from untouchable billionaire to criminal defendant, dying of the same disease he had prevented others from curing. The irony was perfect, the justice was poetic, and the message was unmistakable. During a simultaneous manifestation in 12 cities worldwide, Adam addressed his growing movement of followers. Those who profit from suffering will experience that suffering themselves, he announced, his luminous form appearing in churches, mosques, temples, and public squares across the globe. This is not vengeance. This is balance. This is the natural consequence of choosing darkness over light. Marcus Aldrich had the power to save millions of lives. Instead, he chose to let them die slowly and expensively so he could buy another yacht. Now, he faces the same death he imposed on others, and he will pay the same inflated prices he created. Let this be a lesson to all who hear. Your wealth cannot protect you from justice. Your power cannot shield you from consequences. Your crimes will find you no matter where you hide. The message was received loud and clear by the parasitic leadership class. Emergency meetings were held in secure bunkers and private islands. Military contractors, pharmaceutical executives, arms dealers, and financial manipulators realized they were dealing with something beyond their control or understanding. Some tried to negotiate, others attempted to hide. A few even tried to repent publicly, hoping to avoid Aldrich's fate. But Adam's response was the same to all of them. The choice. The secure communication systems of 847 powerful individuals all received the same message simultaneously, delivered through devices that had been deemed impossible to hack. You have built your power on humanity's suffering. You have convinced billions that scarcity and conflict are natural when they are manufactured. You have stolen the future from children to line your pockets. I offer you one choice: voluntary abdication and genuine repentance, or forced removal and public exposure. Those who choose wisdom will find new purposes serving humanity's advancement rather than hindering it. Those who choose pride will discover that no amount of wealth or power can protect you from the consequences of your choices. You have 72 hours to decide. After that, the choice will be made for you. The Lightbringer. The responses were as varied as the recipients. Senator Rebecca Morrison immediately announced her resignation from Congress and revealed the defense contractors who had been bribing her to vote for military interventions. She established a foundation dedicated to peacebuilding and conflict resolution, funded by liquidating all her financial assets. General Harrison Price attempted to flee to a non-extradition country, only to find that every airport security system had flagged him as a terrorist. His mercenary activities in Africa were simultaneously exposed to international media, the UN Security Council, and the families of his victims. David Rothschild, heir to the banking dynasty that had manipulated global currencies for centuries, tried to negotiate, sending messages through encrypted channels about mutual cooperation and shared interests. His attempts at contact were ignored, and within weeks, every central bank he controlled experienced technical difficulties that exposed their manipulation of currency markets. Some chose repentance and found redemption. Others chose defiance and found destruction. A few tried to hide and discovered that in a world of connected devices, there was nowhere to run. But the most important response came from those who witnessed these events unfold. The global awakening. As the parasitic leadership class either reformed or fell, ordinary people began to understand that the systems oppressing them weren't natural or inevitable. They were artificial constructs maintained by a small group of individuals who profited from collective suffering. Workers realized they had been deliberately kept divided, while their labor enriched those who contributed nothing. Patients understood that their illnesses had been prolonged for profit rather than treated for health. Citizens recognized that their governments had been serving corporate interests rather than public welfare. But instead of despair, this realization brought hope. Because if the systems were artificial, they could be changed. If the oppression was manufactured, it could be dismantled. If the scarcity was engineered, it could be replaced with abundance. Adam's followers didn't just spread his religious message. They began implementing practical solutions to humanity's problems. Dr. Jennifer Walsh's free medical clinics expanded into a global healthcare network that provided advanced treatments at cost. Maria Santos's renewable energy technologies were made open source, allowing communities worldwide to achieve energy independence. Captain Richardson's military reform movement ended 3 ongoing conflicts by exposing the war profiteers who had been perpetuating them. Within 2 years, the fundamental structure of human civilization had shifted. Those who controlled resources began using them to eliminate scarcity rather than maintain it. Those who held political power began serving human advancement rather than corporate interests. Those who possessed knowledge began sharing it freely rather than hoarding it for profit. The transformation wasn't instantaneous, but it was inexorable. And through it all, Adam remained the light-bearing figure who had guided humanity away from its parasitic leadership toward its own divine potential. The hidden truth. In his underground facility, Adam monitored the transformed world with the satisfaction of an architect watching his blueprint become reality. Childhood mortality had dropped by 60% in 18 months as suppressed medical treatments became freely available. Renewable energy installations were growing exponentially as open-source technologies eliminated artificial scarcity. Regional conflicts were ending as the arms dealers who perpetuated them faced justice or bankruptcy. The Kavari pulsed with contentment in the depths of his consciousness, its alien satisfaction mixing with Adam's human pride. We have succeeded beyond our original parameters, it communicated through waves of shared emotion. Yes, Adam agreed, watching news feeds from around the world showing unprecedented cooperation between formerly hostile nations. But they still don't understand what actually happened. This was the delicious irony of his success. Humanity believed they had been saved by divine intervention, rescued by a messianic figure who had appeared at their darkest hour to liberate them from their oppressors. They worshipped Adam as a light-bearer, a savior, a bridge between the human and divine realms. They had no idea that their salvation had come from an alien parasite and a farm boy who had simply grown tired of watching his species destroy itself through artificial scarcity and manufactured conflict. Does it matter what they believe? The Kavari asked, sharing memories of its homeworld where survival trumped truth every time. If the result is their transcendence? Adam considered this question as he watched footage of former enemies working together to restore damaged ecosystems. Their cooperation, mediated by followers who believed they were serving divine will rather than alien manipulation. Around the world, humans were beginning to cooperate in ways they never had before. Art and science were flourishing as creative energy was freed from the daily struggle for survival. Children were growing up in a world without manufactured scarcity or engineered conflict, their potential no longer limited by systems designed to exploit them. The species was finally reaching toward its true capabilities, guided by the belief that they were following divine mandate rather than biological imperative. No, Adam decided, his consciousness expanding once more to touch the global network that had become his extended nervous system. It doesn't matter what they believe. What matters is what they become. But as his awareness flowed through satellite networks and deep space monitoring stations, Adam sensed something that made both him and the Kavari pause with excitement. Other fragments of that original meteorite were still traveling through space, carrying the possibility of transformation to other worlds, other species, other opportunities for transcendence. His enhanced senses could detect their quantum signatures scattered across the galaxy like seeds waiting for the right soil. His work on Earth was complete, but the universe was vast, and consciousness was precious wherever it arose. Perhaps it was time to explore what other partnerships might be possible among the stars. We could guide them all, the Kavari suggested, its ancient patience giving way to something that might have been ambition. Every species capable of transcendence lifted to their potential. Adam smiled, feeling the weight of infinite possibility. Together, they had become something unprecedented. Not human, not alien, but a bridge between biological intelligence and cosmic purpose. Apart, they had been limited by the boundaries of single worlds and single species. Together, they could become something that transcended those limitations entirely. First, Adam said, his consciousness already reaching toward the stars, let's see what else is out there. The transformation of Earth had been just the beginning. In the quantum foam that connected all conscious beings, Adam sensed other opportunities, other species, other chances to guide evolution from mere survival toward conscious transcendence. His messianic deception had worked perfectly on humanity. But other species might require different approaches, different mythologies, different paths toward the same goal. Adam was no longer just the savior of one world. He was becoming something far more significant, the architect of consciousness itself, spreading the gift of transcendence throughout a universe that desperately needed guidance toward its own divine potential. The Kavari pulsed with anticipation, its eons of survival-focused evolution finally evolving into something that could dream of futures beyond mere existence. Together, they had learned to reshape worlds through the power of belief. Now it was time to reshape the galaxy through the power of hope.